Delivery girl ran to a mafia boss for help. What he did shocked everyone. Aria Romano was invisible. In a city of millions, she was just a flicker of red fabric darting through the rain on a rusted scooter, a girl whose entire worth was measured in the heat of a cardboard box and the speed of a tip. But tonight, the city felt different. The air was thick with a silence that shouldn't exist in the industrial district. Her GPS had rerouted her through a dead zone. A stretch of crumbling warehouses where the streetlights had long since been shot out. She pulled her scooter to a halt, checking the address on her phone, when a low, gravelly voice cut through the dark. Is it all there? The ledger and the keys? Aria froze. 20 feet away, near a rusted loading dock, the two hooded men stood. Rico Vasile, broad and predatory, held a heavy black briefcase, while Marek Volkov, lean and sharp as a blade, checked his watch with a nervous twitch. They weren't supposed to be there, and Aria certainly wasn't supposed to see the thick stacks of ledgers being moved from a hidden wall compartment into the case. These weren't just records, they were the secrets of the DeLuca Empire, the names, the bribes, the blood. A floorboard creaked under Aria's boot. The sound was small, but to the men in the alley, it was a gunshot. Rico's head snapped toward the shadows. For one heartbeat, Aria's wide, brown eyes met the void where his face should have been. Witness. Marek hissed, the word dripping like venom. Fear, cold and paralyzing, surged through her, but survival was a reflex. Aria didn't scream, she turned and bolted. She didn't drop the pizza bag, it was her shield, her only excuse for being in a place she didn't belong. She could hear the heavy thud of boots hitting the pavement behind her. They were faster, stronger, and driven by the desperation of men who knew that if she escaped, their lives were forfeit. The alleyways became a labyrinth of jagged brick and stinking trash. Her lungs burned, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She knew the police wouldn't arrive in time, and even if they did, the DeLuca name carried more weight than a badge. She needed a fortress. She needed a man whose shadow was larger than the men chasing her. Up ahead, the looming iron gates of the DeLuca estate rose like a mountain of stone and steel. It was a place of execution for some, but for Aria, it was the only sanctuary left in a city that had suddenly turned into a hunting ground. With the hooded men only yards behind, their heavy breathing audible over the wind, Aria threw herself at the gate's buzzer, her screams for help swallowed by the roar of the looming storm. She was a delivery girl with a secret that could burn the city down, and she was pounding on the devil's door, praying he would let her in. Aria slammed her weight into the cold iron bars of the DeLuca estate, her fingers frantic and trembling as she fumbled for the intercom button. Behind her, the rhythmic thud of Rico and Marek's boots grew louder, a predatory beat that promised a quick and silent end. The towering gates, etched with the ornate D of the DeLuca family, looked less like a sanctuary and more like a fortress designed to keep the world out, or bury it. High above, a spotlight snapped to life, bathing Aria in a blinding, clinical white glare. Halt! Do not move or we will open fire, a voice boomed over the speaker, devoid of any human mercy. Two guards materialized from the stone guardhouse, their tactical rifles leveled directly at Aria's chest. In their eyes, she wasn't a girl in distress, she was a distraction, a potential suicide bomber, or a scout for a rival family. The laser sights danced across her red polo shirt, centering right over her frantic heart. Please! Aria screamed, her voice cracking as she held the red pizza bag up like a white flag. They're going to kill me. Please, let me in. Step away from the gate and put the bag down, the lead guard commanded, his finger tightening on the trigger. He signaled to his partner, who was already speaking into a radio, calling for backup to sweep the perimeter. They didn't see Rico and Marek yet, the two hooded men had melted into the tree line just beyond the light's reach, waiting for the guards to do their dirty work for them. Aria looked back into the darkness. She could see the glint of Marek's eyes in the shadows, watching, waiting for her to be mowed down by the very man she was trying to reach. She turned back to the camera lens embedded in the stone pillar, her wide eyes filled with a desperate, raw honesty. "I have the ledger," she shrieked, a last-ditch gamble. "I saw them at the warehouse. If you shoot me, you'll never know who betrayed him." Inside the mansion, the security feed was being broadcast onto a massive wall of monitors. Vincenzo De Luca stood paralyzed for a heartbeat, his whiskey glass paused halfway to his lips. His guards were seconds away from neutralizing a threat, but Vincenzo wasn't looking at her face. He was staring at the crumpled, grease-stained logo on the pizza bag she held. It was a crude drawing of an old man tossing dough, the exact same logo his father had hand-painted on their first storefront 40 years ago. "Hold your fire," Vincenzo growled into his headset, his voice vibrating with a sudden, sharp authority that made the guards freeze mid-aim. "Open the gate. Now." The guards hesitated, stunned. "Sir, she hasn't been swept. It could be a trap." "I said open the gate," Vincenzo roared. As the heavy gears began to groan and the iron doors parted just enough for a human to slip through, Arya didn't wait. She lunged into the lion's den, the gates hissing shut just as Rico stepped into the light, his face twisted in a silent snarl of defeat. She was inside, safe from the wolves, but as she looked up at the stone-faced men surrounding her with weapons, she realized she had just entered the heart of the storm. Vincenzo De Luca descended the marble staircase with the slow, predatory grace of a man who owned the air everyone else breathed. His guards stood in a rigid semicircle, their weapons still angled toward the girl shivering on his floor. Arya was a mess of tangled hair and rain-soaked fabric, clutching that red bag to her chest as if it were a shield made of gold rather than thin polyester. "Back off," Vincenzo said, his voice a low vibration that commanded instant obedience. The guards retreated into the shadows of the foyer, though their hands remained inches from their holsters. Vincenzo stopped 3 feet away from Arya. The air in the mansion smelled of expensive mahogany and old money, a sharp contrast to the scent of exhaust and cheap pepperoni clinging to her. He didn't look at her face at first. His eyes were locked on the bag. With a steady hand, he reached out and took it from her trembling grasp. He traced the faded, grease-stained logo, the old country illustration of a man with a flour-dusted apron. To his men, it was a symbol of poverty, a cheap meal for a low-rent district. To Vincenzo, it was the ghost of a man who had taught him that honor was more important than profit. "This shop," Vincenzo murmured, his thumb brushing over the ink. "The owner, he doesn't take orders after 10. Not unless he knows the family." Arya found her voice, though it was barely a whisper. He said the order was for a V, he said to get it here no matter what. He told me if I got into trouble, I should run to the house with the iron lions." Vincenzo's eyes darkened. His father's old partner still ran that shop, acting as a silent ear for the De Luca family. If he had sent this girl, it wasn't just about a pizza. It was a signal. He looked at Arya then, really looked at her. He saw the genuine terror in her wide eyes, but he also saw the grit it took to run toward a mafia stronghold instead of away from it. "You risked your life for a delivery?" Vincenzo asked, his gaze narrowing. "It wasn't the delivery," Arya choked out, her courage finally fraying at the edges. "I saw them, Mr. De Luca. Your men. They were in the warehouse near the docks. They were taking books, black ledgers. They saw me. They said I had to be cleared." A heavy silence fell over the room. The guards exchanged nervous glances. Vincenzo felt a cold, familiar rage beginning to simmer beneath his ribs. The old country bag wasn't just a nostalgic relic. It was the vessel that had brought the truth to his doorstep. His father always said that the most loyal people weren't the ones you bought with millions, but the ones who knew the value of a hard day's work. "You're safe now, Arya," Vincenzo said, and for the first time, his voice lost its jagged edge. He turned to his head of security, his expression turning to stone. "Take her to the library. Get her a warm coat and something to eat. And tell the boys at the gate to stay sharp. The wolves are still at the door, and I think it's time we showed them what happens when they hunt on my grounds. The heavy iron gates of the DeLuca estate had barely finished their mechanical hum when the darkness of the tree line shifted. Rico and Merrick stepped into the stark glare of the perimeter lights, no longer running, but walking with the arrogant confidence of men who believed they held the winning hand. They didn't see a fortress, they saw a workplace where they held rank. "Open up!" Rico shouted, his voice echoing off the stone pillars. He stared up at the security camera, his hood pulled back to reveal a face hardened by years of doing Vincenzo's dirty work. "We're trailing a thief. A girl in a red shirt. She's got something that belongs to the organization." Inside the guardhouse, the security team looked to their headsets. Vincenzo's voice came through, colder than the ice in his whiskey. "Let them talk. Let's see how deep this grave goes." Merrick stepped forward, his eyes darting toward the mansion's front doors. "We saw her slip inside. She's dangerous, probably a plant from the Vanni family. Hand her over now, and we'll handle the interrogation. We don't want to disturb the boss with street trash." The heavy front doors of the mansion creaked open, but it wasn't a guard who stepped out. It was Vincenzo DeLuca himself. He stood on the stone portico, his hands tucked casually into the pockets of his tailored trousers, the wind tossing his gray-streaked hair. He looked down at them from the height of the stairs like an ancient king looking at dust. "Disturb me?" Vincenzo's voice was a low, dangerous purr that traveled through the intercom to the men outside. "You've already disturbed my dinner. And you've disturbed a guest of this house." Rico's posture faltered. "Boss, you don't understand. That girl. She's a witness to a..." "To a what, Rico?" Vincenzo interrupted, stepping down the first few stairs. The guards at the gate shifted, their weapons now subtly tracking the two men instead of the perimeter. "A witness to a theft. Or a witness to a betrayal." Merrick tried to salvage the lie, his voice rising in desperation. "She stole a delivery. We were just trying to recover." "Enough," Vincenzo snapped. The word hit like a physical blow. He gestured to the guards, and the gates began to groan open once more. But this time, they didn't open to let someone in. They opened to draw the hunters into the trap. "You want the witness? She's right here. Come and tell her to her face what she stole." As Rico and Merrick stepped onto the gravel driveway, the gates slammed shut behind them with a finality that made Marek's blood turn to ice. They weren't the hunters anymore. They were standing in the middle of a kill zone, surrounded by men who took orders only from the man on the stairs. Vincenzo looked at his watch, then back at the two traders. "The girl told me you were looking for a black briefcase," Vincenzo said, his eyes flashing with a predatory light. "Funny thing is, I don't remember authorizing any transfers tonight. So, here is the deal. You have 60 seconds to tell me who paid you to steal from me, or you'll find out exactly how disturbed I can get." Arya stood in the center of the grand library, her feet sinking into a Persian rug that probably cost more than her family's apartment. A heavy wool coat, smelling of cedar and expensive tobacco, had been draped over her shoulders by a silent, stone-faced guard. Despite the warmth of the crackling fireplace, she couldn't stop shaking. The library was beautiful, lined with thousands of leather-bound books and gold-leafed frames, but to Arya, it felt like a gilded cage. The door creaked open, and Vincenzo walked in. He had shed his suit jacket, his white sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and old scars. He didn't look like a businessman anymore, he looked like the warlord the legends described. "Eat," he commanded, gesturing to a silver tray on the desk containing a bowl of steaming broth and bread. Arya looked at the food, then back at him. "Why are you helping me? I'm nobody. I just deliver pizza." Vincenzo sat behind the massive mahogany desk, his eyes tracking her every movement. "In this city, being nobody is a superpower, Arya. People talk in front of you. They forget you have eyes. They forget you have a memory. He leaned forward, the firelight dancing in his dark, calculating eyes. You didn't just see a handoff. You saw the foundation of my empire being chipped away by men I called brothers. Arya felt a lump in her throat. She realized then that the danger in the alley was simple, a physical threat she could run from. The danger in this room was far more complex. She was now a piece on a chessboard she didn't understand, held by a man who moved kings and pawns with the same cold indifference. She wasn't just a witness anymore, she was a weapon in Vincenzo's hands. I want to go home, she whispered, her voice small against the towering bookshelves. Vincenzo stood up and walked toward her. He stopped just inches away, his presence overwhelming. You can't go back to that life, Arya. Rico and Merrick know your face. My enemies know you came here. If you walk out those gates right now, you won't make it to the end of the block. He reached out, his hand hovering near the Bold Country logo on the bag she still clutched. You ran to the lion's den because you knew the wolves couldn't follow you here. But remember, the lion doesn't offer protection for free. You have information I need. Give it to me, and I will make sure you and your family never have to worry about a dead zone shortcut ever again. Arya looked into his eyes and saw the truth. She had escaped the hunters only to be claimed by the king. She was in a place where mercy was a currency and loyalty was written in blood. The alley was terrifying, but the library was where her old life truly ended. Vincenzo's senior lieutenants stood gathered at the library doors, their faces etched with a grim, professional hunger. They were waiting for the order to take Arya to the basement, to the cold rooms where nobodies were usually squeezed for every drop of information they possessed. The tension in the hallway was thick, a silent expectation of the brutal interrogation that always followed a breach of security. Vincenzo looked at his men, then back at the girl shivering in his oversized coat. He saw the way she stared at the silver tray, too terrified to even touch the bread. Rocco, Vincenzo said, his voice cutting through the silence of the room. The head of security stepped forward, his face a mask of iron. Yes, boss. The room is ready downstairs. We have the tools set up. Cancel the room, Vincenzo replied, his eyes never leaving Arya. And tell the kitchen to prepare the grand dining hall. I want the full Sunday spread. The braciole, the handmade gnocchi, everything. The room went deathly silent. Rocco blinked, his composure cracking for a fraction of a second. Sir. You want to feed her? I didn't ask for your confusion, Rocco. I asked for dinner. Vincenzo's voice dropped to a dangerous, low rumble. This girl didn't come here as an informant. She came here as a messenger from the old neighborhood. She carries the scent of the shop my father built. In this house, we don't interrogate guests who bring the truth. We host them. The decree sent a shockwave through the mansion. The guards exchanged looks of pure disbelief. In the history of the DeLuca family, no outsider, especially not a delivery girl from the streets, had ever sat at the mahogany table in the grand hall. It was a seat reserved for blood and high-level alliances. By seating her there, Vincenzo wasn't just giving her a meal. He was declaring her protected under the family crest. Arya looked up, her wide eyes darting between the confused guards and the imposing man before her. I don't belong at a dinner table like that, she stammered. You belong wherever I say you belong, Vincenzo said, offering her his arm with a formal, terrifying grace. Tonight, you are not a delivery girl. You are a witness to the DeLuca honor. And while we eat, you are going to tell me every detail about the men who made the mistake of chasing you. As he led her out of the library and toward the chandelier-lit dining hall, the staff scrambled in a panic to set the table. Vincenzo's message was clear to everyone watching: the rules had changed. He wasn't just hunting the traitors, he was elevating the girl they tried to kill, turning a nobody into the most untouchable person in the city. The grand dining hall was a cathedral of gold leaf and shadow, but Arya could hardly swallow a single bite of the handmade gnocchi. The opulence felt heavy, like the air before a lightning strike. Vincenzo sat at the head of the table, his movements precise and calm, yet his eyes remained fixed on a bank of sleek security monitors that had been wheeled into the room at his silent command. The mind often hides details to protect itself from trauma, Vincenzo said, his voice smooth as the vintage wine in his glass. But the eyes never forget the shape of a threat. Look, Arya. He gestured to the screens. The footage played in a loop, grainy, high-contrast thermal images and night vision angles of the estate's perimeter. Arya leaned forward, her hands clutched in her lap. She watched the two hooded figures standing at the gate, their faces partially obscured, arguing with the security team. They said they were clearing the area, Arya whispered, her breath hitching as the taller man, Rico, pulled back his hood to wipe sweat from his forehead. That's him. The broad one. He's the one who held the briefcase. He told the other one that if I talked, they were both dead men. Vincenzo's grip on his wine glass tightened until his knuckles turned a ghostly white. He didn't look surprised, he looked deeply, profoundly disappointed. He zoomed in on Rico's face, then on Merrick as he stepped into the light to light a cigarette. Rico Vasile, Vincenzo murmured, the name sounding like a curse. I paid for his mother's surgery. I walked his sister down the aisle when her father died. And Merrick. I pulled him out of the gutter when he was 16. The betrayal wasn't just a business loss, it was a personal fracture. These weren't just hooded men or rival thugs. They were his own street lieutenants, men who ate at his secondary table, men who wore the DeLuca crest on their watches. Arya watched as Vincenzo's expression shifted from the warmth of a host to the absolute zero of a judge. They weren't just chasing you because you saw them, Arya, Vincenzo said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet register. They were chasing you because they knew that if I saw them through your eyes, would see the truth I've been too loyal to notice. They aren't just stealing ledgers. They are selling the names of our undercover contacts to the highest bidder. The grand dining hall was a cathedral of gold leaf and shadow, but Arya could hardly swallow a single bite of the handmade gnocchi. The opulence felt heavy, like the air before a lightning strike. Vincenzo sat at the head of the table, his movements precise and calm, yet his eyes remained fixed on a bank of sleek security monitors that had been wheeled into the room at his silent command. The mind often hides details to protect itself from trauma, Vincenzo said, his voice smooth as the vintage wine in his glass. But the eyes never forget the shape of a threat. Look, Arya. He gestured to the screens. The footage played in a loop, grainy, high-contrast thermal images and night vision angles of the estate's perimeter. Arya leaned forward, her hands clutched in her lap. She watched the two hooded figures standing at the gate, their faces partially obscured, arguing with the security team. They said they were clearing the area, Arya whispered, her breath hitching as the taller man, Rico, pulled back his hood to wipe sweat from his forehead. That's him. The broad one. He's the one who held the briefcase. He told the other one that if I talked, they were both dead men. Vincenzo's grip on his wine glass tightened until his knuckles turned a ghostly white. He didn't look surprised, he looked deeply, profoundly disappointed. He zoomed in on Rico's face, then on Merrick as he stepped into the light to light a cigarette. Rico Vasile, Vincenzo murmured, the name sounding like a curse. I paid for his mother's surgery. I walked his sister down the aisle when her father died. And Merrick. I pulled him out of the gutter when he was 16. The betrayal wasn't just a business loss, it was a personal fracture. These weren't just hooded men or rival thugs. They were his own street lieutenants, men who ate at his secondary table, men who wore the DeLuca crest on their watches. Arya watched as Vincenzo's expression shifted from the warmth of a host to the absolute zero of a judge. They weren't just chasing you because you saw them, Arya, Vincenzo said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet register. They were chasing you because they knew that if I saw them through your eyes, would see the truth I've been too loyal to notice. They aren't just stealing ledgers. They are selling the names of our undercover contacts to the highest bidder. Vincenzo's attention shifted back to the red pizza bag resting on the corner of the desk. The grease-stained fabric looked out of place against the gold-trimmed decor, a humble object that had survived a war zone. He reached inside, his hand brushing past a stray packet of red pepper flakes, until his fingers hit something hard, cold, and heavy tucked beneath the cardboard floor of the bag. With a sharp tug, he pulled out a slim, high-tech digital tablet encased in a black leather sleeve. It wasn't a pizza, it was the DeLuca family's digital ledger, the digital witness, to every secret, every bribe, and every hidden asset the Empire possessed. I didn't know, Arya whispered, her eyes wide as she realized she had been carrying the very thing Rico and Merrick were willing to kill for. They must have shoved it into my bag during the scramble in the alley. They weren't just chasing me to kill a witness, they were chasing me because I had their prize. Vincenzo tapped the screen. A prompt for a biometric bypass appeared, followed by a series of encrypted files that began to scroll. As he navigated the data, his face hardened into a mask of pure fury. The ledger didn't just show missing money, it contained a digital trail of communication between Rico, Merrick, and a rival syndicate. They hadn't just been stealing, they had been planning to sell the digital keys to Vincenzo's entire security network at midnight. "This is the heart of my house," Vincenzo said, his voice a low, terrifying growl. "And you, a girl who only wanted to finish her shift, saved it from being torn out." The big reveal wasn't just about the stolen data, it was about the total collapse of the traitors' plan. Because Arya had reached the estate first, the digital ledger had automatically synced with the mansion's secure server, locking Rico and Merrick out of the encryption. They were standing outside with nothing but empty threats, while their entire betrayal was currently being projected onto Vincenzo's wall. The doors to the dining hall burst open. Rico and Merrick were marched in by 4 of Vincenzo's elite guards, their hands zip-tied behind their backs. They looked at the table, expecting to see a terrified girl being interrogated. Instead, they saw Arya Romano sitting in a chair of honor, a silk shawl over her shoulders, while the boss held the very tablet that proved their guilt. "The delivery is late, boys," Vincenzo said, his voice echoing with the finality of a gavel. But the message was received loud and clear. Rico's knees buckled. He looked at the screen, then at Arya, realizing that nobody he had hunted had become the witness that would end him. The digital evidence was undeniable, and the boss's mercy had officially run out. The heavy oak doors closed behind Rico and Merrick for the last time, their pleas for mercy fading into the cold, silent depths of the estate. Vincenzo didn't look back. He stood by the window, watching the city skyline. The same city that, only hours ago, had treated Arya like a ghost. He turned back to the table where Arya sat, the red pizza bag now a relic of a life she would never return to. The terror that had etched her face in the alley was gone, replaced by a stunned, quiet realization. She was still breathing. She was safe. "The shop in the old neighborhood is closing, Arya," Vincenzo said, his voice now a calm, steady anchor. "The owner is retiring. He's tired of the cold and the fear. But he told me something tonight when I called him to confirm your story. He said you were the only one who ever looked him in the eye and treated him like a man, not just a landlord." Arya looked down at her hands. "He was kind to me. I just wanted to do my job." Vincenzo walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture not of a boss to a pawn, but of a protector to his ward. "Your job is over. From this moment on, you and your family are under the DeLuca name. Your brother's tuition handled. Your mother's medical bills paid in full. And the apartment in the district where the lights don't work. You're moving to the Heights tomorrow." Arya shook her head, tears finally spilling over. "I don't understand. I didn't do this for money. I just didn't want them to win." That is exactly why you deserve it, Vincenzo replied. Everyone else in this city wants something from me. You only wanted to survive. You showed more loyalty to a cardboard box than my own men showed to their blood. The sun began to crest over the horizon, painting the library in hues of gold and amber. Arya looked out at the gates, the same gates she had pounded on in a state of pure, raw desperation. They were no longer the entrance to a lion's den, they were the walls of her new world. Vincenzo handed her a small, gold-embossed card. This is my private number. If a shadow even moves toward you, you call. But I don't think you'll have that problem anymore. The city knows now, the girl in the red shirt belongs to the lion. As Arya walked out of the mansion, escorted not by a guard, but by the boss himself, she realized that her wrong turn in the alley had led her exactly where she was meant to be. The delivery girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who had faced the darkness and found a king who recognized her light. The old country was a memory, but the new life, the life she never dreamed of, was just beginning.